I never told my son Daniel about the truth behind my quiet life. He always believed his mother was an ordinary office worker, a woman who cooked leftovers, wore old clothes, and came home tired from a modest job. What he didn't know was that I was earning $40,000 a month as a senior operations director at a global firm, managing contracts worth millions and decisions that shaped thousands of careers. But I never said a word. I didn't need to. Real dignity doesn't live on display. It breathes quietly in silence. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, Daniel called. There was hesitation in his voice, the kind of nervousness that always came before he asked for something big. "Mom, Clana's parents are visiting from abroad. We're having dinner Saturday night at Azure Garden. Please come." Something in his tone made me pause. It wasn't the sound of a proud son inviting his mother. It was the tone of a man trying not to be embarrassed. "Do they know anything about me?" I asked softly. There was a long silence. Then he muttered, "I had told them you work in an office, that you live simply." Simply. Such a small word, and yet it cut so deeply. It carried pity, distance, embarrassment. "All right, Daniel," I said calmly. "I'll be there." When the call ended, I looked around my living room. The worn-out armchair, the chipped coffee table, the secondhand curtains. Everything about my home whispered humility. And suddenly, I had an idea. If Daniel and his in-laws believed I was poor, I'd show them exactly what they expected. I wanted to see how they would treat me, a woman who they thought had nothing to offer. By Saturday evening, my plan was ready. I wore a faded gray dress.
The waiter poured wine into Victoria's crystal glass, but not into mine. I didn't mind. I was still studying her. Every gesture, every smirk, every word was a calculated show of superiority. She carried herself like a queen, accustomed to obedience, while her husband, Richard, sat beside her with quiet arrogance, polishing his golden cufflinks as if the light in the room needed his permission to shine. Dinner began politely enough. Victoria talked about their trip from London, about their little inconvenience flying first class, and about the new villa they had purchased on the coast. Her voice dripped with pride disguised as charm. Then, smoothly, she turned her attention to me. "So, Alina," she said, slicing her steak delicately, "Daniel tells us you work in an office." I smiled modestly. "Yes, just small administrative tasks, paperwork, some filing here and there. Nothing special." Victoria nodded, pretending to be impressed. "How admirable. I always say all honest work has dignity, even the simplest kind." Her words were sugar-coated knives. I could feel Clara shift uncomfortably beside Daniel, but she said nothing. Richard chuckled softly. "It must be difficult to manage on such a small salary in this city. Everything's so expensive these days." "Oh, I manage," I said, keeping my tone light. "I save where I can. I don't need much." Victoria leaned forward slightly. "That's such a brave attitude. Not everyone accepts their limitations with such grace." It was so subtle, so smooth, that no one else at the table seemed to catch the insult, but I did. And I tucked it away carefully, like a bullet I'd fire later. They continued boasting about their lives, their vacations, their daughter's private education, their important friends. They even mentioned the down payment they'd gifted Daniel and Clara for their home, making sure to emphasize the word gifted. Clara's face burned with embarrassment. Daniel tried to steer the conversation elsewhere, but Victoria was relentless. "And tell me, Alina," she said with feigned sympathy.
The table had grown quieter now. The laughter was forced, the air colder.
Even the waiters seemed to sense the tension that clung to us like invisible smoke. Victoria sipped her wine slowly, her jeweled fingers tapping the glass. She was calculating something. I could see it in her eyes. Finally, she smiled again, the same rehearsed smile she had worn all evening. "Elena," she said sweetly, "I hope you don't misunderstand us. We only want what's best for Daniel and Clara. You've raised a wonderful son, and now that he's building his own family, it's natural to think about stability." "Stability," I repeated softly. "That's a good word. What kind of stability do you mean?" Her tone turned honeyed, as if she were talking to a child. "Financial, emotional, all kinds, really. We just don't want Daniel to feel pressured or burdened, you understand? Marriage is delicate, and we'd hate for him to be distracted by unnecessary worries." I set my water glass down gently. "You mean me, don't you?" Victoria hesitated but didn't deny it. "Of course not, dear," she said with a soft chuckle. "We simply think a little support might ease things for everyone." Richard leaned in, lowering his voice. "What my wife means is, we'd like to help you financially. A small monthly allowance, so Daniel doesn't have to." My heart went cold. They weren't offering kindness. They were offering to buy me off. They wanted me invisible, quiet, comfortable, and out of their daughter's perfect life. I smiled faintly. "How generous of you. May I ask how much this allowance would be?" Richard cleared his throat. "Perhaps $500, $700 if needed." I nodded, still smiling. "So, $700 a month to stay out of my son's life. That's the offer." Victoria frowned, her charm faltering. "Elena, please don't misunderstand us. We only want what's best for you and Daniel. Elena, please don't misunderstand us. We only want what's best for Daniel and Clara. You've raised a wonderful son, and now that he's building his own family, it's natural to think about stability." "Stability," I repeated softly. "That's a good word. What kind of stability do you mean?" Her tone turned honeyed, as if she were talking to a child. "Financial, emotional, all kinds, really. We just don't want Daniel to feel pressured or burdened, you understand? Marriage is delicate, and we'd hate for him to be distracted by unnecessary worries." I set my water glass down gently. "You mean me, don't you?" Victoria hesitated but didn't deny it. "Of course not, dear," she said with a soft chuckle. "We simply think a little support might ease things for everyone." Richard leaned in, lowering his voice. "What my wife means is, we'd like to help you financially. A small monthly allowance, so Daniel doesn't have to." My heart went cold. They weren't offering kindness. They were offering to buy me off. The silence around the table was so heavy it almost echoed. Victoria's perfect posture faltered. Richard's expression hardened, and Clara's eyes shimmered with the weight of shame. Daniel's jaw tightened. He knew something was about to happen, something irreversible. I leaned back slowly and smiled. "You know, Victoria, I think you and I are more alike than you'd ever imagine." Her brow furrowed. "I highly doubt that." "Oh, I don't. We both understand the power of money, just in very different ways." I picked up my water glass and swirled it thoughtfully, mimicking her earlier arrogance. "You see, you use money to control people. I use it to set them free." Her lips twitched. "That's an interesting way to justify poverty." "Poverty?" I repeated softly, setting the glass down. "Is that what you think I am?" The waiter returned with the bill, placing it discreetly beside Richard. He reached for his wallet, but I gently laid my hand over it. "Let me," I said calmly. Everyone froze. Victoria gave a tight laugh. "Elena, that's not necessary.
You've done enough tonight. I insist, I replied, pulling out a sleek black platinum card. Its silver letters gleamed faintly in the dim light. The waiter's eyebrows lifted slightly before taking it. Victoria's eyes widened. That's unusual for someone who works in an office. I smiled. It's company issued. Comes with the title. Richard frowned. What title? Regional Director, I said quietly, for Carter Global Operations. I manage 5 branches across 3 countries. My monthly income averages around $40,000. The silence that followed was electric. Clara gasped softly. Daniel dropped his fork. Victoria blinked several times, her painted smile cracking. That's impossible. I continued evenly. It's true. I sign contracts you couldn't read without legal counsel. I approve budgets that could buy everything in this restaurant a dozen times over. I don't mention it because I don't need to. Real wealth doesn't perform, it observes. Richard's voice shook slightly. Then why? The waiter had barely walked away when Richard's phone buzzed on the table. He looked at it, frowned, and his confident mask slipped. He excused himself, stepping aside to make a call. Victoria sat stiffly, clutching her designer handbag as if it could shield her from shame. Clara's head hung low. Daniel sat frozen, torn between anger and disbelief. I stayed silent. There was nothing left for me to prove. Moments later, Richard returned, pale. There's an issue with my card, he muttered to Victoria. The bank blocked our account temporarily. It's some kind of system check. The irony was almost poetic. The same couple who had spent the entire evening worshipping money couldn't even pay their bill. I smiled faintly. How inconvenient, I said softly. But don't worry, the dinner's already taken care of. It's on me. Victoria's face turned red. We don't need your charity. It's not charity, I replied gently. It's irony. Daniel exhaled slowly, trying not to smile. Clara looked like she might cry again. Victoria slammed her napkin on the table. You came here to humiliate us. No, I said calmly. I came here to observe. You did the humiliating all on your own. For a long moment, no one spoke. The tension in the air felt thick enough to touch. Then, softly, I reached into my old canvas tote and pulled out another card. This one metallic, transparent, with my name etched in platinum. The waiter's eyes widened. A centurion card? He whispered. Victoria blinked, confused. What's that? Richard answered quietly, defeated. It's American Express's top-tier invitation card. It's only given to the ultra-wealthy. I placed it neatly on the table. Go ahead, I said. Pay for the dinner with this if you prefer. Consider it a gift from the woman you thought needed $700. Victoria looked at it as if it were poison. I don't want your money, she said bitterly. I know, I replied, but you wanted my absence. You offered to buy it earlier, remember? Her jaw clenched. Richard said nothing. Daniel looked at me, not with shock anymore, but pride. For the first time in years, he saw his mother clearly. Clara finally found her voice. Mrs. Carter, I'm sorry. I know, I nodded, but your parents owe the apology, not you. Victoria opened her mouth, but I raised my hand. Don't, I said quietly. You've already said enough for one night. I don't need an apology that's more about saving face than changing behavior. I stood up, sliding my chair back. Here's what I do need you to understand.